Well, welcome everybody. This is John Sarber, and welcome to our Thursday evening Zoom Michigan solar story tonight. And first thing I've got to do is thank our sponsors, the State Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, EGLE, um, Harvest Solar, Homeland Solar, and Sri Energy have been sponsoring these presentations for quite a while now, and we appreciate it. I was just talking to Jim about renewing his membership, and I'd like to encourage all of you, if you haven't already joined GLREA or renewed your membership, to do that. You can do it online at glrea.org. Your membership helps us in a number of ways. It supports our advocacy and educational efforts, but also having a strong membership really helps us with respect to advocating for good policies at the state legislature in Lansing. Tonight we have Patrick's going to join us, and he's going to talk about an energy efficient solar home that's involved with a farm and an intentional community. And I'm going to be real interested to kind of see how that all kind of fits together. And so please, before everybody kind of mute themselves, and after Patrick does his presentation, we'll have, I think, plenty of time for questions and answers. So go ahead, Patrick. Why don't you start your screen sharing and your presentation?
Sure, here we go. Okay. Hello, everybody.
There you go. It's full screen now. Super.
Yep.
Thanks.
You can see it? Good.
Yep.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thanks for showing up to this and your interest in what I've been doing. I'm calling this solar story from a home to a community. I started on my own home, so I'll give some details about that as well. I've got 18 slides. I'm going to try to get through them as fast as I can. Some of the main themes in mind that I want people to be thinking about, and I'll come back to them occasionally, are living within an energy budget, which I think is very important for sustainability. What I call an integrated lifestyle and a hybrid lifestyle. These are aspects of the community. Health, autonomy, and resilience. And I'm saying with a heavy dose of localization, because that's something I really believe in, of relocalizing, as you'll see. First of all, I want to go into how the story began. When I moved to Chelsea, Michigan in 2009, I soon found out about a group in Chelsea called Transition Town Chelsea. And I started attending events and getting involved, and actually became one of the leaders of the group later on. Transition Town Chelsea was based on an international group called the Transition Network. Not a group so much, really a network, started by somebody named Rob Hopkins from the UK. And he was concerned about a few things. This was back in 2006, I believe, when he started the Transition Network. He was very frustrated by the lack of progress on some issues that really concerned him a lot. And his main issues were, at that time, what they called peak oil, which you don't hear about very much anymore, climate change, which we hear a lot about, and then in 2008, 2 years later, he added on economic uncertainty, because you know what happened in 2008, right? So he was frustrated because he thought that a lot of individual efforts weren't really adding up to very much. You know, people changing their light bulbs and stuff like that, right? You can do that, but you feel like you're all alone if you're doing it all by yourself, and you know your contribution is 1 in a billion, right? And he also was frustrated about big government efforts because they seem to pour a lot of money into things and not really produce the results at the scale that's needed. And that was in 2006. How far we have not come since then, right? So he decided he wanted to aim his network at the community level, one town at a time, thus the name Transition Town. Um, so that really inspired me, and inspired Transition Town Chelsea, and inspired me to look at what we can do at a local level here. It also inspired me to put my own solar power system on my home and to join the ACES solar home tours, which were run by Transition Town Chelsea at that time. That's kind of the community aspect of it. Have the whole community go and see a variety of solar homes, including the one that I did about 13 years ago. We used to have about 10 to 14 homes on the solar home tour. And let me just go through my original 2012 system. I'm going to try to breeze through this because this is not the new one. There's me holding a solar panel on my roof. I wasn't the real installer for the system. The installer was actually standing on my garage taking the picture. So this is all staged just for the photo. One of the best pictures. It reminds me of how nice it is in the summertime here. So what it is 4.5 kilowatts of solar from 18 panels on the roof. We had 2 Outback inverters at the time, 2 Midnight Classic charge controllers. I believe those are Classic 150s for those who are interested in that. And the idea here was for redundancy too. I wanted the system to be resilient to various kinds of failures, either grid failures or internal failures of the system. So having 2 of things was really a good idea. I built this on nickel iron batteries. I don't know if anybody's heard of that, but this is very old technology pioneered by Thomas Edison, believe it or not, who tried to make electric cars in 1920 based on nickel iron batteries. They worked, but the problem with nickel iron batteries is they're very bulky and they need occasional maintenance. I mean, you don't want to put this big, bulky, heavy thing on an electric car. I mean, lithium batteries are heavy, but not compared to this. But it's great for a home system. I had room in my basement, so I set this thing up. The system can sell to the grid, and it can also operate off-grid with the batteries. Of course, that's the idea of the batteries. And we have really, really sold to the grid over the years. The performance of this system, I've generated about 30 megawatt hours over and above my home loads, and net of anything that I pulled in from the grid at nighttime, which you're not supposed to be able to do. They want you to only produce as much as you can consume over an annual period. But I told them at the time, well, I'm going to be consuming more energy soon. I'm going to buy an electric car and so forth. So this is just temporary. So they approved me. And in fact, I have been charging my Chevy Volt, actually, which is not a Bolt. It's a Volt. So it's a hybrid with a smaller battery. But I've been charging that 80% behind the meter because of my schedule allows me to work from home a lot, and I can actually charge it when the sun is shining. The 80% is just basically the whole year except for 2.5 months, which is kind of hard to do because it's kind of dark in December and January and the first half of February. I banked up $3,000 in credits from the utility over this time. And I'm trying to draw them down with my Chevy Volt, but I haven't drawn them down yet very much. Unfortunately, I'm no longer accruing the credits, and a strange thing happened with consumers when they switched me to distributed generation. They actually stopped counting any credits for me, and without telling me. Well, we can talk about that a little bit later, probably. The systems perform well. I withstood a 5-day power outage in the winter in 2023. The first 2 days I was limping along. The third day I had so much sun I could actually charge the car and live off grid at the same time. When everybody else was out of power, I was charging my car, believe it or not. And I replaced the control board on one inverter just last year. That was kind of an adventure, but I had a spare control board laying around and I was able to do that. It was nice to have 2 inverters during that time when I was down on one of them. Things do wear out. The way I'm able to do this is that my electricity consumption is only about 3 kilowatt hours per day. And that's compared to the average American home of about 30 kilowatt hours per day. So it's about 1/10 of that. I do that largely because I heat with wood during the wintertime. And I live by myself, so one person consumes less. And I do have a gas water heater and a gas stove, although they don't contribute that much. I'm only using 0.3 CCFs of gas per day. So it's just don't consume very much, basically. Okay, so now, is this any way to live? I mean, do other people want to live like this? And even go beyond what I've been doing at home? It seems like a lot of people are kind of excited about this, and I think it's a good pattern of life. So not only did I decide to start a community of 9 homes powered 100% by renewable energy, but also pair it up with a farm. So we have what you might consider a renewable food system as much as we can at the same time. So the community is called Sylvan's Neighborwood. I'm developing this under my company Inlandish Development LLC, and we are about to go live with selling lots to the community. The first house is under construction right now, and this is the one where my second solar system has been installed. You can see the solar panels there to the right of the picture, and the south-facing barn roof. It looks like a barn, but it's actually half a house and half a barn. As you can see, the angle of these panels is optimized for the winter because this is an off-grid installation. The winter is when it really counts. So they're angled steeply. It's performed quite well so far. The idea of this home is to start the community, to have a model home for the community, and a common house will be a common meeting space for the community as well, even though it will double as a residence for somebody who can share the space occasionally for meetings. So we want to prove something. We want to have a sustainable house that can be energy sufficient, not just efficient, but sufficient, produce as much energy as it needs, and healthy. That's based on some of the materials that we're using. Appealing. Maybe it doesn't look appealing right now because, well, the outside walls aren't finished. It's got a bunch of scaffolding and weeds around it, but it will be, trust me. And incorporating natural materials as well. I think the furthest we can push using natural construction materials also will tell a better sustainability story, and generally natural materials are better for your health too. So it plays into the healthy angle of it. Like I said, this house will also serve as common meeting space. The energy system on the house is 27 solar panels, Helene, if I can pronounce that right. And the total rated output is 9.6 kilowatts. So it's more than twice as big as my present home as far as a solar array. It's got one Schneider inverter. I'm not crazy about the Schneider inverter, and I'm not crazy about the fact there's only one of them. Like I said, I prefer redundancy. They come in this size, and I didn't really see the need for 2 of them, I guess. 3 Midnight Classic 200 charge controllers. The 27 panels are in, I believe, 3 strings, each one paired up to 1 charge controller. And the 3 strings are 3 sets of 3 each. So it's 3 times 3 times 3 in parallel. It's got kilovolt batteries, 3 of those with a total capacity of 22.5 kilowatt hours. Kilovolt, unfortunately, went out of business recently, so I'm not sure what the future of that's going to be. It is an off-grid system completely. And since it's completely based on solar, I took the opportunity to put a lot of things on AC circuits, but also we're going to be utilizing direct current DC for lighting, since solar actually is DC and LED lights are actually DC too. Why convert back and forth, right? And I would like to have a shout out here to Jim Bates from Bates Electric Incorporated, who installed it. And I know Jim's on this call. So great job, Jim. And the mess that you see in the pictures is not Jim's mess. That's the other construction mess. Jim made a nice, beautiful system here, as you can tell by the conduits and everything. And what's that in the lower right corner of the picture? That's part of the energy system too. That's an Amish wood cook stove. And that's part of the key to making this thing work during the wintertime. This house is going to be heated by wood also. And of course, being a cook stove, you can also get some cooking ability with wood during the wintertime. And being Amish, of course, it uses no electricity of its own. Some of the other features I'll just run through really quickly of this house, because it's not just about solar. It's also about, like I said, natural materials. It has 11-inch walls of hempcrete, which is a substance made of hemp hurd mixed with a lime binder. This actually is the first permitted hempcrete house in Michigan when hempcrete was just coming into the National Building Code at that time. It's got lime plaster on the outside and earthen plaster in progress on the inside. We're using blown-in cellulose for the ceiling on the second floor, and hemp wool bat insulation as well, more hemp products. We would like to put an earthen floor in the house if we can get that project together, and some cob up to a certain height in interior walls. And the reason for some of these things is that both the earthen floor, the cob, and the hempcrete walls is that they can act as a thermal battery. They can absorb a lot of heat during the daytime, either from the sun through southern exposure or through the wood stove, and then radiate it back out at night, so you're not getting up at night to wondering why it's cold in the house. Of course, the thing is super insulated anyway. Like I said, Amish wood cook stove, a heat pump water heater, which is electric, but plugs into a standard 120 volt outlet and runs on 15 amps. It's very efficient, so it doesn't gobble all your electricity, especially during the wintertime. Steel armored cable. Now this I consider to be a health aspect for the AC power, because it shields you from electromagnetic waves, basically, being encased in steel. We didn't do that for the DC wires because we didn't think it was necessary for DC, low voltage. The house is also wired for Ethernet, so it's going to have fiber optic service. I don't plan to have Wi-Fi in the house for the same kinds of health reasons. The radiation from the Wi-Fi I don't think is good for me or anybody else. So that's kind of the design points of this house that kind of make it unique. We hope it serves as an inspiration to some of other community members, although other people are going to do other things. They might have a straw bale house instead of hempcrete, for example, because straw bales are, of course, very plentiful in this area. Here's some pictures of the house inside. You can see it's a work in progress, not finished yet. On the left, you see some of the hemp wool bats that are going to go upstairs eventually. In the center is the 3 windows facing south. Through the center window there, you can just barely maybe make out this giant pile of firewood. It's about enough to probably heat the house for 3 to 5 years. I just ran into a lot of free firewood last year. It probably heats some other people's homes. The other 2 photos, you can see some of the raw hempcrete and also some of the plaster. It may not be very clear as it's coming through the Zoom meeting, but in the rightmost photo, the plaster is up above, and it's a little bit of a light purple or lavender color and fibrous because it has fibers mixed into the clay and sand. It looks a lot cooler, I think, in person than you'll see in the photos here. We'll probably put a second coat of plaster on top, and it won't be as fibrous, but it'll still look kind of rustic and kind of strange, but interesting. Okay, and so for the community, what else do we have? We're developing a farm on 13 acres of the property. The total property is 22 acres, so this is a majority of it. We want to produce a variety of farm products to serve both our community and the wider community commercially as well, like selling at farmers markets or at Agricole, which is a store that I co-own in Chelsea, or maybe CSA shares, something like that. And the plan is to have a mixed farm, livestock, fruit and nuts, and a produce area, and something called silvopasture when the trees are established enough. And that means silvopasture is basically the animals roaming and grazing in among the trees. So that's a way of what they call stacking functions. You get 2 levels of productivity on the same piece of land. You get the trees, which bear fruit, and you get the livestock production as well, which is kind of a permaculture concept that's being applied to this. The community is going to own the farm, either directly or indirectly. The farm actually might be the homeowners association, believe it or not, for the community. Or the community might just own the land and then contract with the farmer. But either way, you essentially own it, because we want to keep that connection to the community. So far, we've had sheep on the land. The most sheep we've ever had so far has been 12, and we haven't done it for a couple of years. We planted about 150 fruit trees, and 100 of them are still alive, and many of them are producing fruit now. We got a good peach crop a couple of years ago, and we've had produce there until the farmer. We had about 4 acres of produce, but the farmer doing that got his own place and moved out. So we're looking for a new produce operation. This slide is called integrated community. The idea that it's not just a community in the sense, of what typical builders would call a community, just a bunch of homes. We actually want it to be a neighborly place. So that's why we call it neighborhood, where people actually know each other and spend time in community. That's why we have a common house and some meeting space in the common house. We also have what we call an edible park, commons area, and that's going to have some dwarf fruit trees, some berry bushes, herbs, small things like this as kind of decoration, but also productivity. So they'll be available to be consumed by community members. We have outdoor cooking established. In the bottom photo there is actually the earth oven that is on site right now, which we often bake pizzas in and invite a lot of people. Again, that looks great. I can't wait for summer until it looks like that again. To the right is another kind of experimental structure that's also in the edible park. It's an earth bag dome. It was a dome until we decided to finish off the top of it with cob and some wine bottles to make it look kind of interesting. We're going to use this as mostly a root cellar. It actually performs quite well during the wintertime and keeps the temperature reasonable for storing a lot of crops. During the summer, it can be used as a tornado shelter too. Okay, let me see. Participation in the farm is encouraged for community members because I originally envisioned this thing as a cooperative farm that just had people living on site. But participation in the farm isn't going to be required, but just encouraged. And we're looking for people that actually want to get out and do gardening and farming as part of their maybe a part-time activity, maybe some on the weekends or evenings. We're not trying to take people away from their main job necessarily, though. So the requirement is going to be modest, depending on physical ability. It's not for everybody, but a lot of communities require something like 40 hours of community work per year or something like that. And there's always something that somebody can do, even if they're not as able-bodied as everybody else. So we're going to try to ramp up that participation as much as we can. Here is the site plan for the community. I think I maybe need to speed up. What time have we got now? About 7:15 or so. This is how it's laid out. It's kind of a little bit of a busy diagram. It depends on your screen size, whether you can see it. It's 9 lots, 1, 2, 3 at the top, 4 kind of in the middle right, and then 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 at the bottom. Lot number 7 is the one with the common house under construction right now. That's lot 7, kind of in the middle bottom. The big open area to the right and to the bottom, the south, is really the farm area. The edible garden is in between lots 3 and 4, so it's closer to the top central area. Excuse me. And that's the common meeting space outside. We're gonna the community is going to be served by 2 wells, which are located, one in the edible garden and one near it. And so it's a shared water system. Everybody's going to have individual septic drain fields, though. So I talk to people about this, about having like a community farm homestead type situation like this that's completely sustainable and off the grid. And people are like, oh yeah, that's really cool, but I don't know if I can really do this, right? It seems kind of exotic to a lot of people. So what we're trying to do is enable this by building a network of contractors and consultants who can help people build their unconventional homes. Some people have no idea how to start. when they want to build something like this. We're hoping to get a couple of builders who have full design build capability, so somebody could just hand this over to somebody and say, build me a straw bale house. I'd like to see that. And we need to work on referrals for mortgage lenders, because some mortgage lenders are not very are more hesitant when the house looks unconventional. They don't know if their collateral is being well protected. And also Michigan Saves, which is an organization that'll help you with energy improvements such as solar. And I understand from talking to them that your monthly payment on Michigan Saves might be only a little bit higher than your electric bill would be otherwise. So can you finance the cost of a solar power system? Yes, you can. And we want to show that to people to make people feel comfortable. And of course, the great thing about this is once the solar power system is paid off, now you get free electricity, right? One thing that we really behind the curve on is really need to find a values aligned and capable lead farmer for the community. The farm has kind of been neglected for a little while, and you might have seen on the photos on a couple slides back, it looked like it was getting a little bit overgrown and everything. And that either means that we need to manage the farm better, or we need to get more sheep to cut it down. And I'm not sure, probably both. So, and another thing we want to do is we want to provide standard packages that people know work, a standardized home system package, especially the solar package. For that, I'm really set on a company called Midnight Solar. I've been using their charge controllers. They're based in America. They design and manufacture most of their stuff here, actually. And they have excellent technical support, and they're just great people to work with. They actually would like to use this as a showcase for their products. And of course, then it's also a showcase for everything else that we're doing at the same time. So it helps us a lot too. And if a system like this can be standardized, then it gives people more confidence that if a component of the system, like an inverter, were to suddenly go out, we can have a couple spares on hand, so we can swap in a spare right away. It's very important if you're off the grid. On the other hand, of course, maybe we'll allow generators too for backup power. Okay, here's I'm going to go through just a few more slides. This one is called zoning. It's not what you think about zoning, because most people think about zoning ordinances. And man, we've had a lot of interesting encounters with zoning ordinances too. And I can talk about those in the Q&A if people want to hear it. But to me, zoning means something else. It means a pattern of living. And this kind of bullseye chart was actually taken from permaculture design. So it's based all agriculturally. You can see different agricultural products at different places on there. And the idea is and your home is in the middle, right? And everything else fills concentric circles around the periphery of it, depending on how close to home you want to keep it. We're trying to make this really a home-centered community. So we want energy, shelter, and family to be right in the center, right in the bullseye there. Energy is not something that's been in the center historically, because, well, you couldn't produce your own energy, at least not electricity, until recently. And food is, of course, the farm. So that's why there's a blue food circle in the middle. And then food can also be obtained from the outside, right? So food is not completely produced at home. We want to keep our community near. That's why community is in, like I said, zone 2, roughly. And there's a lot of other peripheral things. You got the internet out there. We're not trying to isolate ourselves from the world. We like that. The circle that says work is really all over the place. There's work at home, there's work on the farm, and there's outside work, which you need to make money, right? You have to go outside. And things like commerce, trade, and politics are all outside activities that we really don't look to do much at home necessarily. So that all adds up to what I call a hybrid lifestyle. And I see this as becoming more popular now. I know a lot of homesteader type people who live very close to the land in one part of their lives, but they might be doing remote work over an internet connection on the rest of their lives. I've actually been doing that for about 17 years. So it's not just because of COVID. And an example of how hybrid can you get of old tech and new tech is you got an Amish wood cook stove and a fiber optic connection right next to it, right? How and of course, solar power is new technology. Um, and of course, you got the fibrous hempcrete wall, and you go outside and tend the garden on your lunch break, maybe. Um, we'd like to relocalize, making the homestead more of the center of somebody's life, but not all of life. I don't think that we need to be too extreme with this. I think the future may be a little bit of both. Um, and remember that what comes first in life, really, and that's your human health and your intrinsic human needs, which include socialization, right? Having a community around you. Those things really come first, and of course, food, right? So hold those things close locally as you can. Get those nailed down, hold them close to you. Other things that are not so important, let them go. If the economy crashes and you lose your job, you can still live, right? Or if the stock market crashes or whatever, right? You don't need that money right now. You've got something where you are. Okay, next two points are kind of hard to explain. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. Autonomy, which is a big thread going through this, right? How do you think about autonomy? Is it more like a buffer to the rest of to other dangerous things in the world, or is it like a moat where you can't cross it? And I say yes, it's a little bit of both. It's a buffer in the sense that there's a lot of unhealthy or dangerous things in the world, and you'd like to be a little bit insulated from that. We like to think that organic food that we produce on site, that's fresher, is kind of more of a buffer from some of the other kind of food you can buy. We like to think that our community is more of a buffer. It's not just the individual versus the world, that there's some kind of community in between. And we also like to think that if something goes wrong, like the grid goes down, we have a way to disconnect from it if we ever even do connect. I island my home right now whenever there's a thunderstorm in the forecast or a solar flare or something like that. And that's kind of like a moat. You're saying, okay, we're going to cut this off because something dangerous is going on out there, right? So I flip off the grid for a while. And then I reconnect to the grid after whatever it is passes. If you have autonomy, you're less tied to other things in the world that you might otherwise not want to do based on your values. Maybe you don't really want to. I'm not going to pick my favorite industry, but all of us have industries that we'd really rather not work with, probably. Let's put it that way. Maybe I don't need to work for that pipeline company or something, right? It gives you more freedom to pick and choose what you do in the exterior world. That's what autonomy really does. Last thing on this slide is I think of this as being rooted in the future. Now, the future, which we cannot see, but in one of those transition town presentations that we had several years ago, a concept was introduced called backcasting. And backcasting basically means you hold in your mind what your vision of the future is, what your desired state is, what your desired state for the future. And then you work backwards into what are the current conditions that you need to have in place to produce that desired outcome in 5 years, 10 years, or whatever. It's opposite of forecasting. Forecasting, you start with the current conditions and you try to predict what's going to happen. But backcasting is you start with the future as you see it or as you'd like to see it, and try to set up the present conditions. And I actually think that there's a lot of predictions about the future, about what's going to happen. Some of them wildly utopian, and some of them dystopian. And while a lot of that stuff might happen either on the positive or negative side, I like to think that eventually it gets sorted out someplace in the middle. And we may find that technology changes more to serve human needs in the future rather than to serve its own sake. And so people will pick and choose what they would like to do. And I think that people would rather have some community and a connection to the earth nearby, rather than be completely lost in a virtual world, even if that was possible. Anyway, so I'm trying to set up a viable living option that could be considered among many that could persist into the future. So these are a couple of thoughts on strategy. This is the second to last slide. We placed this community close to a small town intentionally because we actually want to have an impact. We want to be integrated into the wider community. We're not trying to cut ourselves off in general, unless something crazy happens. And we want to be visible. We want people to see what we're doing so that they can see, oh, I could do this too. Or maybe they could say, oh, that's interesting. I could do this better, perhaps, right? And actually offer a viable and visible living option, which people can understand, which is not pie in the sky and not exorbitantly priced either, so that you're going to have the greatest impact if the greatest number of people can do it. There are plenty of sustainable homes that people have built that cost $1 million. Those homes, I would say, have minimal impact. I wish I could get the cost of Sylvan's neighborhood down too. It's nowhere near where it should be. Anyway, the second point, which is a really hard one and really kind of complex when you think about it, is, but it can be stated as, if you want to be sustainable, you need to live within a budget. We have a lot of things that we say are sustainable, but they actually rely on hidden inputs coming from someplace. We can draw on some faraway energy supply or faraway food supply or something like that. And maybe the costs are lower than they should be. So you're not really on a budget, and you can build a big house, even though you don't really need a big house, because you got that grid there and you don't have to pay for it up front, right? Yes, and you can build a lot and say you're net zero and everything, which is another discussion. But the one biggest thing about setting a design point to be off-grid is that off-grid living actually defines the terms of the budget. It puts a constraint on you. I'm not putting a constraint on you. It just, I see Jim Bates has his hand up. Should I just get through one more slide and then I'll take the question? Is that okay? That's living off-grid is what really gets you down to a consumption of 3 kilowatt hours per day. Nothing else does that. And you're definitely going to be more sustainable at 3 kilowatt hours per day than you ever would be at 30 kilowatt hours per day, no matter what they do to the grid. The farm and garden is like an annual budget as well. It's not so much a hard constraint because, of course, you can buy outside food. I don't live completely locally. I love to eat oranges. I think they're important for my health. So it's not a hard constraint. Soil, though, is definitely something that you want to maintain on your site. You're going to care about the quality of your soil because that's the soil you're going to live with, and you're going to be hopefully farming it many years into the future. So it's a long-term investment. It's a reservoir of nutrients and of carbon. So you actually have an incentive just for your own production to be sequestering carbon in your soil, if that's the soil that's providing you sustenance. Because you can grow so much more if you have a high carbon content in your soil, as well as many microorganisms and worms and mycelium. The thing is, the cost on the downside, when you're doing this, the costs are front loaded when you install things like solar power and insulation, et cetera. You're going to pay more for your house because of that than you would otherwise. Although with things like Michigan Saves, maybe that cost can be spread over years. The idea is prepaying your life instead of chasing after money and saying, well, what do I have to do? Invest in growth stocks so that the stock market will be $2 million when I retire, because that's what a lot of people do. That's the kind of backcasting too. You say, well, I need to have $2 million in my 401k 20 years from now, and therefore I'm going to invest all my money in growth stocks today to achieve that desired condition. Well, why not get to the things that you actually want? You actually want food and shelter and community. Medical care we can't provide here, so it's not perfect. But the idea is get what you actually need in life, right? And get it now. Okay, wish list. I said, and you saw the blurb for this talk. about what we could have done if local ordinances and regulations were different. We're actually getting some of the things on our wish list that I just showed you, like the hempcrete and the off-grid stuff. There's a lot of people say you can't do off-grid. Yes, we can. Actually, the building department lets us do it, and the hempcrete. But some of the things that we haven't been able to do very well, we wanted to use composting toilets and gray water systems too, as part of a sustainable community. And we can use composting toilets, but we still have to put in the full conventional drain field. And you can have your composting toilet in addition to it. But once you've spent all that money to put in the full conventional drain field, to add a composting system on top of that is just extra cost. And I think a lot of people probably won't want to do that. They're not going to want to have two septic systems essentially in their house. And you don't get a whole lot of compost from it, really. So we kind of lost that one. It's less economical than it should be. We'd like to do smaller homes. Smaller homes would be very economical if they'd let us. Right now, the minimum square footage in this township is 1,000 square feet. 60 years ago, the average square footage of a new house was 920 square feet. So the average house from 60 years ago is illegal today. Wrap your mind around that. That was actually stated in a planning commission meeting recently, and they still wouldn't budge. They would not like, and about half of the members, about half of the people who have expressed interest in Sylvan's neighborhood want to build a smaller home because they don't need that much space, and a smaller home is more sustainable than a larger home if you don't need it. So that one, I think we still have a 50-50 chance of getting it, though. I think it's still a pretty good chance. We'd like to have more effective clustering, and that really means reducing the drain field sizes. Drain fields take up a lot of space. It also would mean getting some bonus density for having a smaller footprint on the land. You'd think you should be able to get more homes if the homes are smaller. We originally wanted to have 15 homes, and we ended up going down to 9. Shared wells is the next thing, and we've almost got that. We've got a ruling from Eagle that we can have a shared well rather than a big highfalutin community water system. The shared well is going to save people a lot of money. Miscellaneous stuff. We wanted to bury the water tank. Believe it or not, we can't bury the water tank, the pressure tank for the community. Nobody knows why, but that's the rule. You can't put it underground. Of course, if we could put it underground, we wouldn't have to heat it. We put it under the frost line. We almost did that actually until somebody noticed that it was not legal and they made us stop. We'd like to do a hot water coil for the wood stove to actually heat a water tank like the Amish do. Can't find any way to make that pass code. The building officials have been working with us very well, but that's a bridge too far for them. And the last thing is a microgrid. That's the very last point on here. I know there are people, including GLREA, who'd like to enable microgrids in Michigan. It's something we would really like to do to balance the load. It's much more efficient than having each home an island of its own. A lot of the equipment wouldn't have to be redundant like inverters as much. I don't know fully the economics of doing that, but I'd like to explore it if it was made legal. Thank you very much, everybody. I probably ran over my time. I wasn't watching a clock. Be very happy to take questions.
Yeah, we're fine. Why don't you stop the screen sharing? It'll be easier to see folks.
Oh yeah, we're 14 minutes over. Sorry.
And yeah, hey, Jim, go ahead with your question.
I would, but I think Charles Morris asked a question at 7:17 p.m. What's the R value of the 11-inch hempcrete walls?
Oh yeah, I forgot to say it's supposed to be R30. There's some variability being a natural material, but
Okay.
we made the hempcrete less dense to maximize its R value, so it's more porous, and we should be getting about 30.
Hey, Jay, go ahead.
I've kind of got 3 questions here. One is more a comment regarding the nickel iron Edison cells. I'm going to presume that you bought those as opposed to fabricate your own. Did you buy them or did you fabricate them?
I did buy them. I bought them from a company called B Utility Free.
Okay.
Which goes out of business and back into business every few years.
I know an acquaintance out in Texas who runs his entire ranch using 55-gallon plastic drums turned into Edison cells using potassium hydroxide as the electrolyte. My second comment is regarding DC lighting. I am one of two people here within the GLREA that actively powers most of our homes using 12 volts DC. No inverters involved. House is wired for 12 volts. Um, uh, Typically referred to as being a hybrid home. Um, are you looking at 12 volt or 48 volt for your DC lighting? Because either there are products available.
Yes, the 48 volt LED lights are a lot harder to come by.
Yeah.
I had to order them from overseas. I have a couple dozen of those bulbs, but I do worry about the supply of them going forward. And I'm, it's a 48 volt, it's a 48 volt solar power system. We might want to step the voltage down to 12 volts so that we can use more commonly available light bulbs.
Yeah, buck boost regulators work well for that, and you
Yeah.
can get them in large capacity. I run mine on 12 volt for that very reason. 48 volt was much harder to come by. And regarding microgrids, there is a company out in Alexandria, Virginia, just outside Washington, D.C., a company called Emerge Alliance. Emerge Alliance. And twice a year, they set up multiple little homes on the National Mall there in D.C., and they demonstrate a microgrid with wind turbine input, power grid input, solar input, etc., all of which, and including each home within the little neighborhood that runs off the microgrid, also contributes to the grid with any of their excess power. That goes to their local grid, their neighborhood grid, as well as into the neighborhood battery. And they all share in that. It's typically based on 48 volt DC, and a lot of products, things like refrigerators and washing machines and so forth. Most of the products you have in your home that run natively off of 48 volts produced by LG products. And we've all heard of LG. So if you're looking for that line of equipment to go and equip these homes with, check out Emerge Alliance as a possible source of information there. And my last question is, are you considering a community wind turbine if you can get it high enough? I know our winds here in this part of the state are not consistently strong, but if you get it up 100, 150 feet with a large enough swing on the blades, you can usually get a pretty good amount of power out of that and keep it going 24 hours a day. That's all my questions.
Well, if I could, one thing I didn't talk about is the water system, and that is a community system. Even though we can't have a microgrid, we can power the common water system with community-owned solar panels, because I can't sell electricity across property lines, but I can sell water across property lines. So if we were to do that, we might, even without a microgrid, we might have an application for a wind turbine like that in addition to solar panels. It's not that we really need to generate a lot of electricity with a wind turbine, but it sure would be better during the wintertime when you have to provide water to everybody consistently. And if you're not getting much sun, it would be good to have some alternate source of power like a wind turbine. I'd rather
you
do
want to
that.
jump in?
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to jump in if I can. I mean,
Sure, go ahead.
we've been asked, yeah, I was just trying to be generous and let Carlos talk earlier, but Bates Electric and my partners, we have been asked by Patrick to help design a common solar to lower the cost and for the community there. I actually personally would like to build a house there, but that's another story. What I really wanted to share is that although it's not legal to share power across property lines, in terms of just carrying in wires. It's not illegal, as far as I know, to share batteries. And so on the piece of property, there's a building to be built. It's the community barn for the farm that can host a much larger solar system on it, and we can charge batteries. That so because some of these properties and the houses just won't be able to have a big enough solar system on it. They may, but just as a backup and for energy security, we have these batteries then, and the cost of batteries are coming down tremendously. So be able to undock batteries from that barn or wherever and take it to whoever's house it needs to be done. Now that can be done also in the city of Ann Arbor, and we're proposing that because the city of Ann Arbor is avant-garde in terms of developing microgrids. So I think that is really, really super important, a way of creating microgrids. Just bypassing the restrictive, regressive laws that are keeping us from actually creating those. So,
Okay, thanks, Jim. Harvey, go ahead. Harvey? You're muted.
Sorry about that. Are in interest at all your healthy living aspects? Are you monitoring your indoor air quality for particulate matter and carbon dioxide? You're concerned about that. How's your indoor air quality? And then I'll follow on. I put in the chat a note about out in Taos, New Mexico. There's a community similar to what you're doing called Earthships, and I thought you might be interested in that. But fundamentally, what's your approach to indoor air quality?
Yeah, I am familiar with the Earthships. They've been around for quite a while. Some of them would be pushing the envelope on building codes here, but I think it's a great idea. We have not been monitoring indoor air quality yet. The home is under construction, and its characteristics are quite a bit different than it will be when it's all finished off. The wood stove is a concern, and you could say maybe a compromise with health. It's not healthy to breathe in any kind of smoke in quantity, of course. It is designed to almost completely burn up the smoke. It has a circuitous pathway for the smoke where it can continue to combust, so it minimizes the emissions through the chimney. And it seems to be sealed up quite well as far as indoor. I just don't have the data on it until the house is really in operation. When the thing is running, you can't smell smoke inside the house. I'll say that. There's other things that can impact indoor air quality too. Those are even harder for me to assess at this time. But people tend to seal up their houses very tight nowadays. And they would then want to add a heat recovery ventilator to exchange the air with outside air. Otherwise, you're not getting enough outside air in, and you're probably building up any kind of toxic particles that are in your house because it's sealed so tight. I guess that's all I can say right now for that. I'd love to build an Earthship there too, if it was possible. Jim Bates, who was just talking, has been talking about building an Earth-sheltered home, which doesn't, it's not built out of tires or something like an Earthship would be, right? So and there are Earth-sheltered homes in this area that have been approved. So we can do a lot of rather unconventional things. There's just limits to what kind of materials we can use at this point.
Yeah, go ahead, John Gerlin.
Yeah, thanks, John. Hi, Patrick. Really good presentation. maybe my questions have already been answered. Your DC lighting is going to be 48 volt.
Yeah, that was a previous
And-
question, and it was going to be 48 volt. In fact, I've already purchased a big bunch of 48 volt LED light bulbs, but
Yeah.
we may step that down to 12 volts because 12 volt
Right.
lighting and
Right.
appliances are much more commonly available. So we haven't really decided yet.
Mhm.
And you can change.
The other question was when you're
Sorry. Oh, I was just saying we could always change it later. We could go from
Oh.
48 down to 12 at some point in the future if we wanted to.
except you might have to change your wiring. But the other question is about being
we got
off
bigger
grid.
wires. Yeah. Sorry.
Being off grid, you're going to have times when you don't have power from your solar. And are you said you might allow generators? Do you have any other alternatives besides that?
Well, I'm probably not supposed to say this, but we may put a grid connection in someday. I want to get everybody building their homes on that energy budget first, though. I shouldn't say that, I suppose. No, I'm giving it away. But that is an option. Going on the grid has some implications right now. But yes, to answer your question directly, the plan right now is to allow generators, but to make sure that your home is sized so that generators are a very exceptional event. I mean, I've been living with my system at home for like 12 years, and there are exceptional events that have happened that if the grid had gone down, it would have been difficult. The 5-day power outage that we had in 2023 was a little bit straining. That was almost the worst case because we also had ice covering the panels at the same time. But yes, you can imagine a blizzard that starts out as ice. So you get a crust of sleety ice on the bottom and then snow on the top, and you can't get that off the panels for a week. You can imagine that. So I'm not a purist, right? If you get it down to the point where you only need a generator 1% of the time, that's way better than sucking power out of the grid the whole winter. Right? So I don't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Go ahead, Jim. You're muted.
Real quick on the 48 volt lighting, I'm going to propose, Patrick, that we really push on that. You could take 4 12 volt DC auto bulbs and wire them in series, and you make real creative light fixtures. There are companies doing that. I can't bring up the name of it already, but they're selling 40 volt lighting. And as brought up earlier, John, I think, said the wiring harness is smaller. That Tesla, I hate to use that name right now, but they actually were the first to propose that in their electric vehicles, and so you really lowered the weight in the cars. The gauge of the wiring harnesses is smaller, so that applies across board with whatever you're using it in. 40 volt would produce a much better light. The other concept I want to say, if we do make a grid tie, say at the barn, and have a large system there with batteries, it would offer us the ability as a community to take part in there's the FERC Order 2222 virtual power plants that allows people to participate in wholesale electric markets. That's an investment that can bring some return to the community too. I have to give that some serious consideration.
Oh,
but
definitely.
I know that.
What is that called? FERC Order 222?
Yeah, FERC 2222. And so where that's been allowed to take place, like in California, when it was the thing that kept the lights on in California during peak power usage, when there was emergencies taking place, because people had batteries and solar in their house, they were able to actually keep the lights on in a lot of those sections in California.
There's definitely are benefits to being able to supply the grid with power.
There's times you can get $1 a kilowatt hour for it on the open market. So
Oh, I
know.
see, because with this, with FERC order 2222, you can negotiate market rates. Is that what you're saying?
Well, you don't negotiate it. It's out there, and I don't totally know all the ins and outs. And I think that this conversation, John, Patrick, and everybody would be a great conversation for a whole another hour's talk.
Yeah, if
I
they,
think it's a huge
You
opportunity.
kind of set me up because John Richter is going to do a presentation about virtual power plants on
Yeah.
Thursday, March 20th at 7 o'clock.
Excellent.
So those of you interested in kind of what is a virtual power plant and what's the status here in Michigan, join us on Thursday, March 20th. John is the chair of the policy committee for GLREA. Boy, we're at 8 o'clock, but I'm kind of curious, Patrick. I guess I'll grab the last question. Have you actually sold some lots? I assume individuals will own their own lots, but then, like you mentioned, the common areas will be owned by the homeowners association.
that's correct. We have not sold any lots yet. We went through conceptual approval for the site plan from the township in December. We had to get reapproved. We had to move some things around because of perk tests, but now we're getting very close. The engineers have constructed a draft of the final site plan, the final engineered site plan. We've got the county health department taken care of. We've got the fire department. We've got most of these elements from the building department based on the first house. We got the township. All we have to do is go back in for township final approval, and we're targeting May for that. And before we can sell lots, I have to put in the road. There's those, you may have seen on the site plan, there's a short private road. It's about 250 feet long. And we have to put in the shared wells. And there's some legal paperwork, and then we can sell lots.
Okay. So sounds
we're
like you're
targeting
thinking
the
about
summer.
later this summer?
Yeah, I'm hoping for something like August
Okay.
at this
Yeah.
point.
Hey, Jim, we'll give you the last question or comment.
Yeah, I hope to be one of those owners and build that house. But I wanted to offer to people as a resource that's still available, and we'll hope that it continues to be. But USDA has a rural development loans that will allow you to purchase land, money to build your house, and then a 33-year mortgage at 4.5%. You know, whether or not we do what's unraveling in Washington, D.C., that's still going to be available or not remains to be seen. But it's still a great idea and resource that's out there. And if they dissolve it, we should find another way to do that.
Well, we're
That's
after
my
8
plan.
o'clock. So, Patrick, this has been a great and very interesting presentation. I hope you can come back maybe in a year and kind of tell us how the development is going, because it sounds like a lot's going to happen this year. And maybe in the fall, you can come back, give us a presentation, or maybe you can have an in-person tour. That would be great too.
I would love to do that. I would actually like to, in addition, to restart the transition town group and actually have some meetings in that house. And of course get the in-person solar home tours going too again.
That would be great. Yeah. Hey, thanks everybody for coming, and hope to see you next week. And those interested in virtual power plants, see you on March 20th. Thanks again, Patrick. This has been great. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, John. I joined.
All right. Thank you.
So when are we getting our microgrids now? Because now we have enough money because Jim paid his dues.